If you have type O blood, your stomach has been keeping a secret from you your entire life. Doctors will tell you it's just a blood type, a label on a card, something you only think about when you're donating blood or filling out a medical form. But new research into human DNA is showing something much bigger. Type O isn't just about what runs through your veins. It's tied directly to how your stomach handles food, how it fights off invaders, and why some people can eat things that would wreck someone else's gut. For years, nobody connected the dots. Now scientists are starting to understand why. Let's start with what almost everyone already believes about type O, because that belief is exactly where the real story begins. Most people think of O as the boring blood type, the plain one, the one with no extra markers, no complications, nothing special going on. It's called the universal donor because it can be given to almost anyone in an emergency without triggering a dangerous reaction. That's true. That part isn't a myth. But somewhere along the way, universal donor turned into nothing interesting here, and that assumption has been wrong for a very long time. Here's the part that rarely gets explained properly. Blood type isn't just about donations and transfusions. It's controlled by a gene that also shapes proteins found all over your body, including inside your digestive system. The same genetic instructions that decide whether your red blood cells carry an A marker, a B marker, both, or neither, also influence the lining of your stomach, the mucus that protects it, and the way certain bacteria and viruses try to attach themselves to your gut. In other words, your blood type isn't sitting quietly in a blood bank somewhere. It's active, every single day, inside your digestive tract. So why does type O specifically get singled out when it comes to the stomach? Because researchers digging through decades of medical records noticed a pattern that kept repeating itself no matter where in the world they looked. People with type O blood showed up again and again in studies about stomach acidity, stomach infections, and digestive conditions, and not in a random, scattered way. The pattern was consistent enough that scientists couldn't just wave it off as coincidence. To understand why, you have to go back to where type O blood actually came from. Geneticists believe it wasn't the original blood type at all. It was created by a mutation, a small section of genetic code that got deleted from the gene responsible for building the A and B markers. Without that code, the cell can't build either marker, so it builds nothing. That's why type O carries no A or B antigens at all. It's often described as a genetic accident, a copying error that happened thousands of years ago and somehow stuck around instead of disappearing. Normally, small deletions like that vanish from a population within a few generations because they don't offer any advantage and sometimes actively cause problems. But type O didn't vanish. It spread. Today, it's one of the most common blood types on the planet, found in close to half the world's population, depending on the region. For something that started as a mistake, that's an enormous success story. And once scientists asked why a broken gene became this widespread, the digestive system turned out to be a big part of the answer. Here's where it gets specific. Your stomach isn't just a bag that holds food. It's a battlefield. Every single day, your stomach lining is under attack from bacteria, viruses, and toxins that hitch a ride in on whatever you eat or drink. Your body's first line of defense against a lot of these invaders isn't your immune system in the traditional sense. It's the surface of your stomach and intestines lined with sugar molecules that either let a pathogen attach itself or block it completely. And this is exactly where blood type antigens come into play. Because those same A, B, and O markers aren't just floating around in your blood. They're built directly into the lining of your gut. Researchers studying a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori, one of the most common causes of stomach ulcers and a known risk factor for stomach cancer, found something striking. This bacteria doesn't attack every stomach the same way. It has a particular attraction to certain molecular structures, and people with type O blood are more likely to have the exact structure this bacteria latches onto easily. That doesn't mean type O is worse off across the board. It's more complicated than that. Some studies link type O to a higher risk of duodenal ulcers specifically, while other studies have found type O linked to lower risk of certain other stomach conditions, including some forms of stomach cancer. The picture isn't simple, and scientists are still working through exactly why the same blood type can look protective in one condition and vulnerable in another. What is becoming clearer is this. Type O stomachs behave differently at a chemical level compared to type A or type B stomachs. Several research groups have found that people with type O blood tend to produce more stomach acid on average than people with other blood types. More acid means a harsher environment for a lot of bacteria and parasites trying to survive down there. It also means type O stomachs may break down certain proteins faster and more aggressively than other blood types. The single detail is the seed that grew into one of the most talked about and most controversial ideas in nutrition science. The theory that people with type O blood are naturally built to handle a heavier, meat-based diet. This idea exploded in popularity thanks to a diet trend built entirely around blood type. The argument being that type O evolved from ancient hunter-gatherers who lived mostly off meat, so their digestive systems are supposedly tuned for high protein and struggle with modern grains and dairy. It's an appealing story. It's simple, it feels ancient and primal, and it gives people a clear reason for whatever digestive discomfort they're already experiencing. The problem is that mainstream nutrition science has never been able to confirm it. Multiple large reviews looking at people following blood type-based diets found that any benefits people experienced came from the diet itself being healthier overall, cutting processed food, added sugar, and excess carbs, not from any special match between the diet and someone's blood type. So while the stomach acid difference in type O individuals does appear to be real in several studies, the leap from produces more acid to must eat like a caveman is where scientists start pumping the brakes hard. But strip away the diet trend, and there's still something genuinely interesting sitting underneath it. Because if type O stomachs really do run more acidic on average, that has real consequences beyond digesting a steak. Stomach acid is one of your body's oldest defenses against foodborne illness. A more acidic environment kills off a wider range of bacteria before they ever get the chance to cause an infection. Some researchers have proposed that this could be one reason certain populations with extremely high rates of type O blood, especially in parts of the Americas where the number climbs well above 90% in some communities, may have had a survival edge against gastrointestinal infections that would have devastated smaller, more vulnerable groups. This connects to something even bigger than diet or ulcers. It connects to how entire populations survived epidemics that we barely think about today. Cholera is one of the clearest examples. It's a disease that spreads through contaminated water and attacks the intestines with devastating speed, causing extreme dehydration within hours. When researchers studied how different blood types responded to cholera infection, they found that people with type O blood tend to experience more severe symptoms once infected, not less. That seems to contradict everything we just said about type O having a stronger defensive stomach. And that contradiction is exactly why scientists find this topic so fascinating instead of simple. The body isn't one single defense system. It's several defense systems stacked on top of each other, and blood type interacts differently with every single one. Type O may have an advantage at keeping certain bacteria from ever colonizing the gut in the first place, thanks to that more acidic environment and the missing molecular markers pathogens rely on to attach themselves. But once an infection like cholera does take hold, the same lack of markers seems to work against type O individuals, allowing the toxin produced by the bacteria to cause more severe fluid loss. It's not a story of type O being simply stronger or weaker. It's a story of trade-offs, the same kind of trade-offs that show up again and again throughout human evolution. Norovirus offers a similar twist. This is the virus behind most stomach bugs that spread rapidly through schools, cruise ships, and households, causing sudden vomiting and stomach cramps. Researchers investigating how norovirus infects the body discovered that certain strains rely heavily on specific gut markers to attach to intestinal cells, and people who lack those exact markers show noticeably lower infection rates for those particular strains. Because the ABO gene shapes which markers are present, blood type ends up directly influencing who gets hit hardest by which version of the virus. Some studies suggest type O individuals may actually be more susceptible to certain common norovirus strains, while showing more resistance to others. Once again, there's no simple winner. There's only a complicated genetic negotiation that's been running in the background of human digestion for thousands of years. So if there's this much complexity happening beneath the surface, why did type O spread so far and so wide in the first place, especially in isolated regions where it completely dominates? The leading explanation goes back to small founding populations, and natural selection working exactly the way biology textbooks describe it. When early humans pushed into new, isolated territories, especially across the ancient land bridge connecting Siberia to what is now Alaska, they carried only a small slice of the total genetic diversity that existed in the wider human population at the time. If a large portion of that small founding group already happened to carry type O blood, that trait would automatically be overrepresented in every generation that followed, regardless of whether it offered any advantage at all. Scientists call this a founder effect, and it explains a lot of the story. But a founder effect alone doesn't explain why the trait didn't just fade out over the following thousands of years. That's where natural selection steps back in. If type O truly did offer better protection against certain gut infections common in the new environment these populations were adapting to, even a small survival advantage would be enough to lock the trait in permanently. Small advantages, repeated across hundreds of generations, produce enormous long-term effects. A population doesn't need type O to be dramatically better. It just needs it to be slightly better, consistently, generation after generation, until nearly everyone left standing carries it. Isolation played its own role too. Populations that settled into extremely remote environments, cut off from regular contact with outside groups, had almost no opportunity for new blood types to mix back into the gene pool. Whatever traits the original founders carried simply stayed locked in place with nothing to dilute them. This is part of why certain indigenous communities in the Americas show type O rates that are almost impossible to find anywhere else on Earth, sometimes brushing up against every single person tested carrying the same blood type. It's a genetic fingerprint left behind by thousands of years of isolation combined with whatever survival pressure was happening inside the gut the entire time. None of this stayed locked away in ancient history either. It's still playing out inside hospitals and research labs right now. Doctors treating patients with unexplained digestive issues have started paying closer attention to blood type as one small piece of a much larger puzzle, alongside diet, stress, genetics, and the makeup of a person's gut bacteria. Nobody is suggesting blood type explains everything about someone's digestion. That would be an oversimplification just as flawed as the extreme claims made by trendy diet books. But ignoring it completely, the way medicine mostly did for most of the 20th century, increasingly looks like a mistake too. There's also a growing area of research looking at the relationship between blood type and the trillions of bacteria living inside your gut, collectively known as the microbiome. Some of the sugar structures built by the ABO gene serve as food sources for specific strains of gut bacteria, meaning your blood type may actually help decide which bacterial species thrive in your intestines and which ones struggle to get a foothold. If that turns out to be broadly true, it would mean your blood type isn't just a passive marker sitting in the background of your digestive health. It could be actively shaping the ecosystem living inside you right now, influencing everything from how efficiently you extract nutrients from food to how your body responds to inflammation. Of course, none of this is settled science, and it's worth saying clearly that a lot of it remains an active and sometimes heated debate among researchers. For every study showing a meaningful link between blood type and a digestive outcome, there's another study urging caution, pointing out that the differences found were small, or that other factors like age, geography, and lifestyle could easily be muddying the results. Blood type research has a complicated history, partly because it became tangled up with pop culture diet trends that oversold shaky evidence as absolute fact. That history makes serious scientists extra careful before declaring anything definitive, and that caution is a good thing, even if it makes for a less dramatic headline. Still, when you step back and look at everything together, a clear picture starts to form. Type O blood began as a genetic deletion, a flaw in the code that by all logic should have disappeared within a few generations. Instead, it became one of the most common blood types on Earth, and in some isolated populations, it became almost the only blood type left standing. Along the way, it left fingerprints all over the digestive system, shaping stomach acid levels, influencing which bacteria and viruses can gain a foothold in the gut, and possibly even shaping the balance of bacteria living inside people every single day without them ever knowing it. It's not simply the plain universal blood type, sitting quietly in the corner of the blood bank. Inside the stomach, it's been running an ancient, ongoing battle that most people never think twice about. So the next time someone tells you type O is nothing special, just the safe blood everyone can receive in an emergency, you'll know there's a lot more happening beneath the surface. Every time your stomach handles a heavy meal, fights off a stomach bug faster than expected, or reacts differently than a friend's stomach does to the exact same food, there's a strong chance your blood type is quietly involved in the background. The same way it's been involved for thousands of years in populations who never had a name for any of this and never needed one. They just survived, generation after generation, and left the proof sitting inside every cell of their digestive system. Science still doesn't have every answer here. Why some type O stomachs run more acidic than others. Exactly how much of a role blood type plays compared to diet, genetics, and gut bacteria working together. Whether some of these patterns will hold up as more research gets done, or whether they'll turn out to be smaller than they first appeared. Those questions are still being argued over in labs right now, but one thing is becoming harder to dismiss with every new study. If you're type O, your stomach has been carrying a much longer, much stranger story than anyone ever gave it credit for.